Today's the 14th of March, 2023, and yeah, I look a little disheveled. We've been replacing some windows today and doing some other things, but I thought I'd go ahead and come on Tuesdays as I like to try to do on Tuesdays and Thursdays on a regular basis, and this will be a call-in show, and we'll talk about anything that you want to. We can talk about the last couple of videos that I did, live streams that some people got a little bit uh, Mr. Satan means adversary, means accuser. Really? Oh, I guess you got to do a little more studying there. Anyway, so I thought I'd come on if you guys want to bring up some questions about what I covered in the last two videos. Or we can talk about anything else you'd like. The bank failures that are going to increasingly occur, and those banks will be bought, usually the smaller size banks, and they will be bought by the big monolithic banks. Maybe that's the wrong term. The big banks will scarf up the little banks. You know, the big fish will eat the small fish, and the government will bail out and assist the banks, but not you. They won't assist you. They say that they'll cover your deposits and that you'll be able to get your money, but all of this, of course, is really for nefarious reasons, and I think most of us who have been following this know. As I've often said, I'm not a financial guy. This entire financial thing kind of escapes me, and I really don't feel like taking the time to figure it out. I can just tell that it's a problem, and obviously it's to control us. That's really what the bottom line will be, and to protect the assets of the rich and privileged. I don't want to cause a class war, but that's really what it's about. So hello everyone. Let's see. Roy looks like a Wild West gunslinger with the whiskers. Yeah, I'm changing my. You know, it's just kind of different. I haven't done this. As a matter of fact, I never even looked like this when I played in bands. But I'm going to keep growing my hair a little bit, and the beard will keep coming out. Uh, I don't know how it'll turn out in the end. I've done a little bit of shaping here just out of curiosity. I kind of like this shape, but we'll see what happens. So it'll probably change a little bit as we go along. Hello from Kentucky. Yes. Gotta miss it again. My kid just showed up. Oh, that's okay. That's more important anyway. Mary Beth, I guess that's your name. And I don't have the laptop beside me here to look at the chat. I'm going to have to look on the phone, or my camera phone, but of course I've got the phone for you to call in on here if you want to do that. So that's basically where we are. The Ukraine thing, Bakhmut is definitely falling apart. Of course, we know that. I'm not going to repeat all of that. The Western, how should I say this? The West, they've really taken advantage of people for a long time. They're screwing those poor people in Ukraine. As I've said, it's to the point now where they're sacrificing their people for nothing. It's all for the gain of the West, supposedly to take out Russia. There's more to it than that. I hope you're keeping track of it, and I hope you're telling your sons, and especially your daughters, have nothing to do with the U.S. military. It's an evil organization. You know, I've often talked about not often, I've mentioned it several times. The Navy has an advertisement out there, a recruiting advertisement, where it says the U.S. Navy, a global force for good, and it's not. It's not a global force for good. And I was talking with my son Jeremy, as a lot of you know, here some time ago, and we had a live stream with him talking about some of his experiences on the spiritual plane, and he talked about his vision with the castle and those things. If you all were listening, and the end result was of that you don't really go for the good or the bad. You go for truth. You really don't know what the good and the bad are. I mean, to an extent. Sometimes we, as Isaiah said, they will call evil good and good evil. So a lot of times we really don't know really what's good and what's really evil. I think we're learning, but that's really not what we're supposed to be about. And I heard another discussion about this with Dr. Heiser, Michael Heiser. And I even talked to an individual some of you might know. I talked to Derek Brose on the phone yesterday, and we had a really nice chat. First time we've talked together, other than on Twitter. And very interesting because he brought up the same thing. You know, the first lie that was told to mankind was that if you eat of this, you're not going to die, but you'll be like gods, knowing good and evil. And since that's the liar that's discussed by Jesus later on, saying he is the father of lies, that means that that was the first lie. That was the lie that was told. Because in reality, how do we know good or evil? And I think that's a good philosophical question and a spiritual one as well. And there's another quote from another place that I know of, and it says that men will continually be learning, but never come to a knowledge of the truth. And so, really, what we're supposed to do is be careful how we judge others. For instance, a lot of people have judged me poorly for some of my activities, which I can prove were wholesome by and large. Maybe I didn't do it quite the way I should have, but it was wholesome as far as what's righteous in that regard. And you all should know what I'm talking about there. But a lot of people call it evil because they think that they know, and they don't. So instead of being involved in trying to figure out what the good and what the evil are, let's try to find out what the truth is. And that's going to be hard enough, especially in these days. Okay, there is no good without evil. Well, see, that's kind of the path that I'm saying might not actually be the case. So we have to be careful how we look at this. Because what's evil, it's sort of like that old statement, one man's terrorist is another man's patriot, right? It depends on your point of view. In today's world, as I just said, people call good evil and evil good. And what's the frame of reference? And it depends upon who's making the statement. And sometimes the people with the force of government force things on you that you don't consider good, that you may actually consider evil, and vice versa. So rather getting stuck in that paradigm, isn't it better that we just individually look for the truth? And that's probably a very simple way of explaining things, but I think it's something that we need to at least take into consideration and examine. So anyway, I think that has a lot to do with where we are today. Natural law, yeah, natural law. I mean, if you go out where the wild animals are and you're not prepared, you're probably going to be dinner that night for another animal. So you got to be aware of nature and nature's God and nature's law and all that. You can't be foolish with it. Absolutely not. You can't tempt God, by being stupid. So you need to keep your head on and doing it. Praying for world peace. I'm not so certain. I don't know if I'd go that far. I pray for that the righteous, or those who are supposed to be righteous, will wake up and realize the state of affairs. I don't think praying for world peace is going to work. Not this time. I got into a big discussion on that on Twitter some time ago with some people, and they said, well, praying for God to fix this will work. And that may be, but I think he's got some other things in place. So we've got a call from Alaska. Let's see who this is. All righty. Let's see who we got here. All right. Are you there?
Yeah, how's it going?
That's good, yeah. I see you're from Alaska. Would you like to tell us your name? You don't have to.
I'm
You don't have
Alaska.
to. You can use any name you want. Well, I'm sorry, what did you say?
I'm Mark from Alaska, but the name I like to use is I'm a son of God. I'm trying to be a liberated son of God.
Okay, well, I think that's where we're supposed to be, is trying to do that. So what's your comment or your question?
My question is I just try to correctly divide the Bible, and for me, I really have a hard time of understanding this word ephah in Zechariah 5. And I did some studies on it, and it seems to me that this word ephah is disease, ergo, the blackness. It's a dry measure of grain. And so there's no water in it. There's no water word of Jesus. And to me, it's more of children of the corn. It's the law. It's the outward man, the natural man. And we come away from that natural man, and we learn to be overcome our conditional environment with our trials and tribulations and the things that we go through of our mistakes, errors, and you could use the word lost, or iniquity would be something different. That's more something I believe the fallen do. It's evil over and over again, or sin. But I guess for me, as the new covenant says, Satan desires to sift you as wheat. And a lot of us are going to the Ten Commandments of the law or civil law, which are morals and morality, which are very good. But it's common sense we don't go around murdering people. And so I think that you can't mix law and grace together. And so I'm a little confused on this word ephah. And like I said, I believe in Zechariah 5, it's disease, ergo, dry measure of grain, blackness. And so this is children of the corn. And so there's two different barns, I believe, in the Bible. In the old, it's children of the corn, wheat and tares. And in the new covenant, it's written on our hearts. So I'm just a little confused about that word. And I was just wondering if had a question of what you thought about that word, ephah. And I'm not trying to say that I'm right and someone else is wrong. I'm just trying to work together as brothers and sisters.
Understood. Okay. Well, let me hang you up there, and I'll see if I can answer some of that. We'll give somebody else a chance to call, too. Thank you for calling in. So his question
have a good one, and I always look towards beauty and goodness, so I hope you guys do the same, man.
Thank you very much. Hold on just a second. I'm going to be finishing up on answering that last caller, okay? Hold on just a second. So what I consider it to be, and this is open to a lot of discussion, there isn't the rigid law of the Old Testament. The fact of the matter is that according to the story, when the Israelites left Egypt, they were free. But then they wanted to go back into slavery, if you remember the story. And I'm condensing this down quite a bit. They didn't want their liberty. They didn't want their freedom. They wanted to go back to what they had because they were afraid to trust God and themselves. So the law that you see that was added after the Ten Commandments was the law to keep them busy. In other words, idle hands can cause trouble. So you keep them so busy that they can't do that. And it was to teach them. So really what it comes down to is not a new law in the New Testament. What it is saying, okay, now we're going to go back to this. You seek for the truth, and the truth shall do what? Set you free. So we're back to piety and righteousness, and all the commandments can be placed under that. Okay, let's see. You're from North Carolina?
Yeah,
okay.
Wilmington.
Well, okay, what's your question or comment?
I was just calling. I really don't have a question right now, Roy. Appreciate your channel, man. I don't know where you stand because it's kind of like you, I don't know, some things we agree on, some things we don't.
Well, if we agree on everything, we got a problem. If we disagree on everything, we got a problem. So, and I've often talked about the situation with, you have a group of three Jews talking together. This is just a little anecdotal story. You have three Jews talking together, and you got five opinions. That's why it's important for us to look for the truth. We don't call somebody bad because they disagree with us. We don't call somebody evil, right? What we do is we consider what they're saying, and we try to understand each other. But anyway, go ahead with your question.
Hey, you ever heard of that Stomp Yard?
I think so. I'm not certain about it. What are you talking about?
It's where you can have I don't know how many people. It's like 9 people online at the same time.
Yeah. Okay, right. And I would do something like that. I don't know what you're getting at. I do something like that, but my bandwidth here just doesn't. I have a hard enough time running, this. But anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
I got a lot of stuff, man. I really need to share it, man. Just to let people know that God's real, dude. And you know, we're in the end of times, man. I mean, everything that's happening. You know, the
Well,
president.
do you have a website? Do you have a YouTube channel? Well, that's a good way to do it. You know, you
I
could.
can't go live.
Well, you don't
Yeah,
need
I
you
have.
don't need to. You don't need to, but you could
On,
put out your ideas at least. You know.
yeah, I put them on there. But it's it's like nobody watches it. I don't know. It's crazy. But our president is our president because of the people in America, how they act and how they are. That's who they deserve to be in the White House.
I won't disagree with you there. I've basically said the same thing for a long time. Our entire government is not lawful. As a matter of fact, the Constitution, well, in all manners and effects, it really doesn't exist anymore. You know,
Yep.
we've and I don't want to get into a whole discussion here of constitutional law, of Napoleonic law, and that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
they've got it all reversed, and you know, you could blame the way it's written, or you could blame the fact that Woodrow Wilson basically decided that if there's no restriction on it, they interpret the Constitution saying if there's no restriction against the federal government, then they can do it, and that's not what it's supposed to be. There are enumerated powers, specific powers given to them, and they're not supposed to do anything other than that. But you know, you've got this argument going back and forth, and unfortunately, the wicked, evil people and those who want to take advantage of the situation have done so. So let me get another caller going here. We're going to try to cut this down to about like 30 seconds to a minute per call, so that
All right.
we can get more people in. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. That was thank you for the call. It was definitely worthwhile. Now, I had somebody else that was calling in there, and it looks like I may have missed them. Let's see who that is, if I can find them. Okay. All right. I am trying to answer this. Did we get you finally?
Hey, Roy.
702, right?
Yes, that's me.
Sorry, yeah, my phone's kind of this isn't the best phone in the world. It's basically a burner phone that I'm using for these call-ins because, you know, but it has some technical problems. So go ahead. You're from Nevada?
Las Vegas, Nevada, Sin City.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. What's your question or comment?
Hey, Roy, I just wanted to talk to you. I know you mentioned it in the past briefly, but you know, I subscribe to the Ebionite theology. I know you brought it up a few times, and so has Robert Eisenman.
Yes.
And most respectable scholars will agree that the Ebionites or Nazarites were truly the first followers of Jesus.
Yes.
What's your opinion on that? What can you tell me about that?
I think you're right. I think there are some problems, and Dr. Eisenman and I have been friends for quite some time. He actually helped me to get to where I am today. And of course, he gave me a review on my book, The Crimson Thread, that was very, very complimentary, and I appreciated it. The problem is that, and I don't know if you'll understand how I look at this, but I've often said that I doubt this whole situation, that the Messiah was to come through Judah. I've had a problem with that even before I started my Hebrew studies and my history education. And the reason for that is,
Roy, you might actually be onto something, Roy.
Yeah,
you might actually be onto something.
I think see, even the move of the Ark of the Covenant from Shiloh under the Moshite priests to Jerusalem by David was a political move. I don't think God had any real interest in doing that. I think that you know, people say, oh my gosh, here Roy's talking heretical information again. The Bible's the ineffable true word of God. And I'm not going to argue that. What I'm going to say is this, and I brought it up so many times. I don't think that the Messiah, first of all, there are two Messiahs. I don't know if you're aware of this. There's the one in Isaiah 52.
Oh, yeah.
Ben
Joseph and Ben David.
Messiah ben Joseph, who's the suffering servant. And then there's the Messiah ben David, according to the Jewish scripture. However, you got to go back and you got to look at the blessing that Jacob gave to the 12 sons, his 12 sons.
Right.
And the blessing he gives Judah, and I've said this so many times, is the key to what's really going on here. He says, the scepter shall not pass from Judah, nor a lawgiver between his feet until Shiloh comes. And I've explained that Shiloh is where the Moshite priests had the Ark of the Covenant. It's the Ephraimite territory. So we have that,
Right.
and it later became known as Samaria, as the Samaritan area, the Samaritans.
Right.
And Jesus was even accused of being a Samaritan. And I don't think that's an error.
Right.
I think he actually was. So now to put all this together, the Ebionites, I think he had very close ties to them. I'm not certain that he was in a scene in the regular idea of the term. I think he was close to them. I know a lot of his family members, for instance, were there. James, the brother of Jesus, may have actually been the Mori Zedek, as you probably already know, the righteous teacher, the teacher.
And John the Baptist may have worked.
Right, before James, right. And I think all that's true, but I do go along with the New Testament concept that Jesus wasn't quite fully accepted by his family or his close friends. Why would that be? Well, because I think he really was saying, hey, look, we're not Judahites. You know, we're Ephraimites. And so that brings us into an entirely different situation. I'm the birthright son. I'm the birthright. I'm that Shiloh. I'll give him that. And of course, I point to the Heb, who was crucified by historically, we can show in Josephus that he actually was crucified by Pilate, and in other things. So when I take all that into consideration, I think that we're being given some bad information about the Jewish influence, the Jewish history. I really think it comes down to the birthright, not to as the blessing to Jacob by Jacob to Judah states. So
what, Roy?
Yeah.
You know, if you just go to the New Testament, you can conclude, like for instance, in the first few chapters when it talks about John the Baptist's birth, and you look at Zachariah and Elizabeth,
right?
We're told that they're from the tribe of Levi because they're serving in the temple.
Correct.
And then the Greek word that they use for cousin actually could mean they're relatives, like close, like very close, maybe even sisters.
Sure.
The point I'm trying to make is that if they were Levites, that only may suggest that Jesus may have been a Levite as well.
Well, and there are arguments with that. And again, I go back to the situation. You know, you look at the, and I'll close with this because we really do want to get some other calls in.
Sure.
You look at the genealogy in Matthew, and then you look at the genealogy in Luke, and they don't match up. And people say, well, the one in Luke is for Mary, or vice versa, depending upon who. But that's not how things work. So really, what it comes down to is I look at it as a subterfuge, and it really has the whole question is really going back to Shiloh. The whole question is really going back to the birthright line, which is Ephraim and Shiloh. And so that's where I stay. And I look at all that other information as people trying to struggle for political power and position. And that's going to tick a lot of people off because, we've been talking about these things for so long. But a lot of the prophecies still work with that. But it seems like to me somebody's absconded with the actual truth. So I'll leave it at that.
Even the holy place.
Yes.
You brought it up earlier.
Exactly.
I mean, most people think it's Jerusalem, but the ancients believed it was Mount Gerizim.
Right, you're right. And so there are all kinds of things here. So the bottom line is the Ebionites, I think, actually were the ones that really came across and followed these principles. They weren't celibate. I'm going to make that point up front. They're not celibate.
Right.
They had a military camp. And they didn't allow women or young children to be in those camps, and that was really what that was about. But thank you very much for your call. We're going to go.
You're welcome.
Hey, take care. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, so now it looks like we're looking to somebody is from Washington State. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Good. Well, what would you like to say?
Well,
Derek. It's Derek Rose calling. I just thought
Oh,
I'd give you a call.
Derek, wait a minute, you threw me off here. Okay, I got you. Hi, Derek, how you doing? I just
Doing
mentioned
good.
that you and I had a nice discussion on the phone yesterday.
Oh, we did. I just thought I'd call and say hello since you were taking calls and tell you how much I appreciated that conversation.
Well, I certainly appreciated it too, and let me make sure that everybody knows who you are. For those who don't know, Derek Bros, you can find him on Twitter, and he's also on YouTube. And what's the name of your YouTube channel again?
YouTube is Willing Witness.
Willing
It's
Witness.
formerly Global Witness.
Right.
Now called Willing Witness.
Willing Witness, and a lot of good information there. I've known about Derek for some time, and then he went on Felicia Lockhart's show, and it was a really good show. It was about an hour, as I recall, Derek, wasn't it? And anyway, I listened to the whole thing, and I thought it was really quite interesting, of course. And we've had a lot of similar circumstances, and Derek was able to fill in some things for me that I had questions about, and so I thought it was a great conversation. We're going to have more. I even talked about. I think we mentioned that maybe we should do a live show together, didn't we? Say that, Derek?
Yeah, yes, for sure. Either your channel or my channel. I've restarted the channel, and I will probably be doing one live show a week and multiple uploads of videos. So I'm getting quite re-engaged, and I think our conversation, the things that we discuss, would be very interesting, particularly the days and the times that we're in right now.
Absolutely, and just for everybody's information, Felicia Lockhart just put up your YouTube channel on the chat. So if anybody wants to know exactly where Derek's YouTube channel is, Felicia Lockhart, the Lockhart Perspective, just put up the link to his channel. So yes, Derek, I'm looking forward to that. We'll have to do that.
We certainly will. Well, I just wanted to say thank you for that conversation and let everybody know that we will definitely have a forthcoming show at some point here in the near future.
I appreciate it, Derek, and it's really great. I feel a connection to you, a brothership. So I want you to know that.
For sure. Well, I appreciate that, brother. That's the whole point. That's where we all need to be right now.
Yes, for sure.
We need to start coming together and love one another and find the people that are willing to love, particularly accept their faults right now, because you're going to need to deal with yourself. We're all going to be forced to be together, and sometimes you have to live with people you don't necessarily like, and learning how to do that takes some special training that we all have to go through today.
Yes, you may have heard me talk just prior to you calling in. I brought up the point of our conversation about the lie that was told in Eden, and that you'll be like God to know good and evil, and that is a lie. So that's something that we probably really ought to get into. My son brought that up. I don't know if you heard his when he was on live here about 2 weeks ago. He's had quite a few visions from a little boy to he's in his 40s now, and he still gets these once in a while. And one basically was down to this situation where there was this big battle going on where he's trying to do the right thing and stand against evil. And the bottom line is it gets to the very end, which he wasn't able to do because we were getting interference from some people, and I got kind of discouraged about that. But at any rate, the end part is exactly what you said. You don't know what the good is. You don't know what the evil is. Search for the truth.
Yeah, you have no idea.
Right.
And that's why even having arguments or debates about what the truth is almost nonsensical. I usually respond when somebody wants to argue or debate. I go, there is no argument or debate, because you'll never be right and you'll never be wrong, and I'll never be right and I'll never be wrong. Because in the middle somewhere is the truth.
Right.
And the truth is unalterable. The truth can't be altered. The only thing that can be altered is the perception, which is our problem.
Exactly.
So
I agree with that.
In that, we believe something is good and we believe something is evil, but in the reality, we've been trained and we've been told what this prison looks like and how it functions. But the reality is we're starting to see apocalypse. The word apocalypse simply means the revealing.
Right.
And as these things are being revealed to us, it's, the veil is breaking. You're beginning to see your conscious state is growing. Everybody is seeing things that they couldn't see before. And as a result of that, it's disturbing now, but that's not for everybody. That's why those that have ears to hear and eyes to see will see. you don't worry about it. And if they don't hear, then shake off the dust from your boots and move on, because there's those that are sleeping and those that are awake. It's quite simple. But people are beginning to see this, and their conscious state is changing. It's causing divisions in families. It's, the minute you become awakened to this and your conscious state increases and you understand the travesties that are going on around you, you become a very difficult mirror for everybody else, because you're not allowed to be good.
Right. I can speak to that. As we talked about the other day, my particular stance that I've taken, it's amazing. And what's really amazing, Derek, is who calls you evil. When people point at me and say that I'm evil, I've done wrong, usually they have really done things. I find it kind of amusing, actually.
Well, it cracks me up, and those are the people that are calling you evil would identify as a Christian, right? And
right.
They neglect to realize that you're supposed to walk in the footsteps of Christ.
Right.
If you're a Christian, you believe only in what Christ said. So, and if you believe in everything that Christ said, then you're going to be persecuted when you start saying what he said. The difference is Christians aren't being persecuted. Nobody's throwing rocks at them as they walk out of their church. But they're throwing rocks at you and I.
That's
because
right.
We're speaking a different kind of truth. And it's the actual truth about Christ, and not the corporate version, the corporatized version of the Nicene Creed and the Council of Nicaea and the Romans and what they've done to all of the teachings of Christ. That's the abomination. The deception that everybody keeps waiting for happened long ago, long before even Christ's days, or he wouldn't have even needed to come.
Yeah, I and that's why I go back to, when people want to get into these things about heresy and anathema and all that kind of stuff. I go back to Jesus said, "I have not come to judge the world, but to save it." And he said two things that were the two great commandments: love the Lord thy God and love thy fellow man. And then James repeats the same thing under the royal law of the royal law of liberty. So that's really what it is, because all of the rest of it is, as we talked about and as you pointed out here, how do we know something's good or how do we know something's bad? The important thing is that we love God, and we can make judgments, but we're going to be judged by the way we judge. But the important thing is to love God and to love your fellow man.
Yeah, and loving your fellow man, it says, love thy neighbor as thyself.
Right.
And the interesting thing about that is where you can hold people accountable that, just like you're talking about these people that call themselves Christians that come and attack you. That doesn't sound like they're loving you, thy neighbor. Okay, so
right.
But here's the excuse that they would use. It's how you understand what those words mean. Love thy neighbor as thyself. If Christ was being true and his words were true, then his words would not be able to be manipulated. And what I mean by that is he's saying love thy neighbor as thyself. That doesn't give you the excuse to hate them because you hate yourself. So that's not what he meant. He didn't mean to love them as much as you love yourself. He said, love thy neighbor as thyself, as though they are actually you, because they are you.
That's a good
we
point,
are
Derek.
all one body.
Good point. Good point.
We have to love them regardless of whether you hate them.
Right, right.
Because hate is an emotion.
That's true. It is.
And it's tied to a verb unless you act upon it.
That's right. That's right. Well, that's wonderful. I'm glad we got to that. So hopefully we'll be able to, like you were talking about, have another get together and do a live stream together.
We certainly will. We have a lot to talk about, and you and I, just as we did the other day, it doesn't take us long to start eating up an hour or two.
Yeah, it went by fast. I got to admit, just like these do too. Yeah, thank you so much for calling in, Derek. Keep in touch, okay, my friend?
Yeah, for sure. Have a great show, and appreciate you picking up the phone.
Well, yeah, I didn't know it was you. I saw the number, and I thought, oh, I wonder, but I wasn't for sure. So anyway, great. Thanks so much.
Awesome.
All right,
talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
All right. Well, that was a treat. If you don't know Derek Bros, again, look at Felicia just put it up again. Derek's channel on YouTube. She just put it up there again. So that's something. And I saw something from BP Earthwatch here. I wanted to say. I wanted to repeat that he had put up. Let me see if I can find that. Okay, let me see. Here it is. Yeah, Jesse from BP Earthwatch said eyes are being opened, and that's what the apocalypse is the revealing. Thanks for putting that up there, Jesse. I appreciate it. All right. Well, that was a good one. Thanks again, Derek, for calling up like that. That was wonderful of you to do that. Okay, let's see here. We had a call from Ohio. I wonder if that's. I probably know who that is, but we'll wait until they call back. Again, that's the one bad thing about this setup is I don't have a board where we can put people in order of the calls. Sorry about that. This is about as good as it's going to get from this point of view. Okay. So what else should we bring up? Maybe are there any questions about the situation that I showed on the board the other night? I see that. Oh, what's going on here? Oh, our phone's dying. Well, that figures. Okay, so I'm going to have to reboot the phone, ladies and gentlemen. You'll have to wait a few minutes.
Bluetooth pairing.
Yeah, sorry about that. So I can't get any calls right now. The battery just died. It shouldn't have gone away that quick. It's going to take about 2 minutes before it comes back on. Willing witness, yeah. Thanks, Felicia, for keeping that going. I appreciate it. Yeah, that's Derek's YouTube channel's Willing Witness, and he's also on Twitter. And I'm on Twitter. For those of you who you wonder what I'm doing in between these shows and all that kind of stuff, between my videos or whatever, you can keep track of me on Twitter. I usually have some type of activity going on Twitter every day, certainly more than my YouTube uploads. For instance, Derek might post something and I might comment on that, or Joey Biden might put something up, and I'll respond to it, and it's usually not in a friendly way because I have absolutely no respect for him. Actually, I have very little respect for anybody in the United States government anymore. They've shown how we're not supposed to talk about
Bluetooth connected.
we're not supposed to talk about evil and good necessarily, but I think what we can see that they're doing is definitely to the detriment of life and mankind. So I think it's fair, and they put themselves out there. They're supposed to be representing the people, and they don't, and they're supposed to be abiding by constitutional principles, and they intentionally, not accidentally, they intentionally violate them. Look what just happened here that just came out. We knew it anyway. We found out that on the stand during the January 6th trials that are going on, we found out from an FBI agent, a female, who said she was told by her superiors to alter evidence, to lie, and something else, which I don't recall right now. Maybe you all will remember. And on the stand, she admitted that she did those things. Well, in other words, you alter evidence. You keep exculpatory evidence from the defense. That's reason for dismissal of the case of all charges. But the government is so evil, they're not going to do that probably. And that FBI agent and those responsible for telling her to do that will keep their jobs and get promotions rather than getting fired and criminally charged themselves. It's a corrupt government, ladies and gentlemen. There's no way to fix it. Pray, stay out of the way. I'll let Derek talk about his plans in the future. And it'll be interesting to you, I think. Let's see if this comes up here. All right. You'll have to pardon me. Sometimes it takes a minute for this thing to actually kick in.
Okay.
I'm not sure what we're getting some feedback there. You might want to turn down.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you might want to turn down your background or your computer or whatever it is. I think it's feeding back through there.
Sorry about that.
It's all right. Okay, go ahead. What's your comment or question?
Yeah, hey, I enjoy your show, Roy, and what you said about the FBI agents. They were in the crowd infiltrating and just bringing up the atmosphere. So It was all collusion right there. You're right.
Yes, I've worked with the FBI several times. I was a military police officer, an intelligence officer. I was a civilian police officer. I've worked with the FBI several times, and I got to tell you, I have absolutely no respect for them. They're they frame people by it's a habit. They do it by habit. It's almost
they
almost
live by
SOP.
different rules.
Yeah, and this thing that just happened, as I was just discussing, that agent took an oath to the Constitution and violated her oath of office, and she's using the excuse that she was ordered to do it. Well, I'm sorry, but you've committed a crime, and so have your superiors, because that's called a conspiracy to and I forget what under the U.S. code it is, but it's a conspiracy to deny someone of their rights. They should be in prison. They should be arrested. She should have been arrested the moment she got off the stand and hauled off and booked. And then
that's what the Nazis said. We were following orders.
Right.
Same deal.
Right. And I agree.
You know.
But see, there's no fixing this, because there's one way that this is going to get fixed, and most people say, well, God's going to do it. But God doesn't, come out of the sky and, thunder and lightning and, scare all the bad guys. That's not how he works. Historically, this is how
it's got to be tore down, the whole system, and redone.
This right here. I've called it the Assyria of the modern days. Just like in the old days when Assyria came down, God sent Assyria. Well, I'm saying that the Assyrians were righteous, but he used another nation to punish the nation of Israel. We little people,
right.
I've stood up against this Leviathan, behemoth, evil empire for a long time. And what good has it done? Well, the only good it's done is that we get it to talk about it, really. But another nation like this, kicking the ass of these people over here, and that's happening right now. That's happening right now, economically and militarily and politically. It's happening right now. So we can talk about a lot of things, but that's how it's going to have to happen. That's why I say pray, stay out of the way, because you don't want to be a victim of this fight that's going on between these two characters.
That's right. Hey, I have one more question before I get off. I respect what you do in your live streams and all your videos. I watch a lot of them. I do have a question. The verse in the Bible says, no man come to the Father but by the Son.
Right.
How do you reconcile that in your position that Jesus was not the only Messiah? How does that fit in that verse exactly?
I'll answer that by telling you this. Go to the Gospel of John and read down the genealogy there and ask yourself, what does it mean that Adam was the Son of God? So I think you're going to have to look at that. In the ancient times, Derek would be very good at answering this, by the way, but I'm going to do it this way because I'm going to do it from an historical perspective, not just a biblical perspective. First of all, Dr. Michael Heiser said the only begotten is a mistranslation. It's actually the unique one, okay? The chosen one, not the only one. That's the first thing. Because it even talks about the sons of God, right? Even in Genesis 6. A lot of the archangels have El at the end of their names, which means that they're Elohim, okay? So the fact of the matter is that it's been altered by, frankly, Derek already said it, and I'm just going to add it in this way. It's going to make Catholics upset and a lot of Christians, but this was done by the Nicene Creed, the Nicene Council. The earliest Christians did not consider Jesus to be divine or a deity. They didn't consider that. As a matter of fact, you don't see that at all in James. But that's beside the point. What I really want to get to is this: being a son of God is a declaration of approval more than anything else, and that's not really quite right. But that's the best thing I can do for you right now without getting into a lot of detail. In the Dead Sea Scrolls.
I just hope we have a blessed hope. That's what I.
No, you do. But you see, that's the thing. You're supposed to. Who is this Christ? Who is the Son? Well, it says, and Paul, as much as I dislike him, he takes some things from James and he repeats them. And this is one of them. Let this mind be in you that was in Jesus, that he, being found in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal to God. And there's another one, right? It says, another one says this. It says that Jesus is the heir to all that the Father has. And we are what? We are joint heirs.
with Jesus.
What does that make us?
Yep.
When a woman marries a husband, she takes his name, and then she's supposed to reflect those same attributes if she's a good wife. So in the allegory of the marriage of the church to God, we are taking his name and we're supposed to emulate him. And that's what Jesus was saying. When he's saying, and when it says that you have to go by the Son, you have to become a son with that name. And that's going to blow a lot of Christians' minds, because they're going to say, well, that's blasphemy. Well, that's what they accused Jesus of, right? When he said what? I am. Before Abraham was, I am. And they wanted to kill him. They called him a blasphemer. So
by that admission that there would be no rapture then.
There is not the rapture is the awakening of everybody to the Derek and I even talked about this. It's interesting you should bring this up. I talked about it in a video in my religion series. You can go in the playlist. I don't remember which one it was. There's a lot there. But I talked about what the cloud is. The cloud isn't the cloud in the sky. It's an allegory of the spiritual awakening, the spiritual realization. That's what it is. So it's the cloud parts, and you see the truth for what it is. It's the rapture isn't in my. Okay, I'm going to let you believe what you want. Pardon me, but in my estimation, in my opinion, the rapture that most Christians, especially the evangelicals and the born agains, look forward to, it's not taught. It's totally incorrect. And but we are supposed to follow the Son. And what does that mean? We take, Dr. Heiser did a great job on explaining this. When you take God's name on you, then you cannot act outside of his interests. And if you do, then you've taken the name in vain. And that's what it really means to take the Lord's name in vain. You say that you've taken his name upon you, but then you go whoring, you go stealing, you go murdering, whatever. Well, then you just blaspheme God, right?
Judge them by their fruits.
Exactly.
Well, listen, I'll get off here. Thank you so much. I enjoy your channel, and keep it up, Roy.
Well, thank you so much for calling in. We appreciate hearing from you.
Okay, take care.
Okay. All right. Well, we're getting some good information here. I kind of like it that we don't talk just about the political stuff, which of course I can do, or the military situation. But we really do need this time where we can talk about some of these other things. And I know that my approach, especially when I say that, I'm not so sure about the Jewish Messiah situation and the way it's been handed down to us, that these things are political. I know that rubs people really wrong. But I hope that I've explained it well enough that at least you should be asking the question about what's really going on here. Birthright was important in Israel, absolutely. The whole idea of the crimson thread wasn't Kabbalah, like it's been turned into today. The idea of the crimson thread was to identify which of two twins is the firstborn, that's the first breaker of the matrix, because that's the birthright son. My book is really what that's about. It's out of print. I think most of you know this now. So this one here, it's out of print, but this is about the actual situation with the birthright son and why I am so adamant about the situation with Shiloh in the blessing to Judah, because that's a hint and it makes sense in a lot of ways, which we don't have time to go into here. But I don't have the book in print anymore, but you can go online and get it. If you go to my reading in the playlists, there is Reading the Crimson Thread. You can go there, and in there is a link to a website where you can read the manuscript. And I know that's not the most fun thing to do, but you can at least read the manuscript. And if you don't read anything else in the book, if you read absolutely nothing else in the book, read the book reviews and read my introduction where I explain the historical basis for why I wrote the story the way I did. And then you might want to read chapter 10, which gets into the Hekkelot, which is the precursor to Kabbalah, and it's about ascending through the different levels of heaven to approach the throne of glory. Introduction, well, book reviews, introduction, and chapter 10. Okay. All right. We've been going for almost an hour. I think it's been pretty good. We've touched on quite a few things. We've talked about how nasty the government is and how it's selling everybody down the drain, how this whole bank thing is starting to come unglued, as we've been warning about for a long time. Loss of supplies, parts. You know, it's getting so you can't even get parts for things that break down. Let's see who this is. Okay, this, I gotta tell you, this says suspected spam caller, whoever you are. It's a 754 number, but I'm gonna answer it, okay? Let's see what happens. It says suspected
Colonel
spam.
Potter.
Okay. Do you know what comes across saying you're suspected spam?
I have a question for you.
Okay,
and
wait. Where are you calling from?
South Florida. It's Janet Klomberg.
Oh, Janet, hi. You know what?
Yes, sir.
This
Listen,
keeps happening.
Listen, I want to ask you a question.
Okay.
The book of Acts.
Yes.
On the day of Pentecost.
Right.
Then this is how I learned it, and I'm open for answers. I was taught that it was the Jesus Christ, the gift of Holy Spirit, had 9 manifestations. 9 manifestations: word of wisdom, word of knowledge, discerning of spirits, faith, miracles, healing, speaking in tongues, and I can't remember for the life of me what the last one was. Could you share with me your thoughts and opinions on that verse?
Yes.
Because I know I would really love to know.
Yeah, I think it's very true. As far as, and I'm careful with Acts, of course, but there's some historical.
Yeah, because I think that's Paul, right? That's Paul.
Well, it's somebody associated with Paul. Some people say it was Luke who wrote it. I'm not certain that's the case, but there's a lot of Pauline doctrine, and of course, Paul is presented as some kind of a hero, which is. And that's a problem because especially when you have the Jerusalem assembly, and I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about there.
Exactly, I do.
Okay, so as far as the Holy Spirit's concerned, I think what it is we all have different spiritual gifts, and if we are, and we don't all have all the same gifts.
Exactly. Right. Totally agree.
Yeah, so it depends upon what God. And I'm going to put it in his lap. I'm not saying that you can't attain other gifts. I'm not saying that, but yes. I'm saying you're brought here and you have certain gifts. Mine, I think, I certainly haven't been able to heal anybody. I mean, my wife died, and I couldn't help her. And God didn't, answer my prayers on that. So obviously, I don't have the gift of healing.
I think that's what makes the body so unique collectively together.
Right, and
is that we all have different gifts, and that we need to come together to utilize those gifts and recognize them in each other.
Exactly. Like mine, I think it's pretty obvious that probably mine, and people are going to laugh when I say this, but I think the most obvious gift I have is the gift of discernment. Now that's in these scriptural and religious things, and in my profession as a military officer, as a police officer, I was razor sharp. But
I would agree. I would agree 100%. I do. I think my gift is speaking in tongues. I keep it private.
Yeah.
I don't share it.
But let me ask you a question.
It's something that I was that came very easy for me, but it's not in a Pentecostal sense, if you know what I mean.
Okay, sure.
It's in a very personal relationship, I think, to edify my own spirit.
I think that's true. What's important about the gift of tongues, the speaking in tongues, and if you read in Acts what happens there's a group of people that it's a diverse group. They all speak different languages, but when the person speaking in tongues spoke, they each heard what that guy said in their own language.
Ah. Okay.
Just take that into consideration. That's an important aspect, because most people don't realize that they read it, but they don't really realize what happens. So in other words, it'd be like,
so the way that it was presented to me was that it's either the tongue of angels or the tongue of men.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna say that isn't the case, because you've had a personal experience where you've understood that, and that's okay. But the example that's given in Acts, again, and this would be the example today. Let's say that, I'm strolling down the streets. I don't want to put myself up high on a pedestal here. I'm just using this as an example. I have the gift of tongues, and I'm walking down the street, and I see this guy. He's a German. This guy's a Russian. This guy's from Spain. This guy's from Portugal. This guy's from China. This guy's from Australia. He's an Aborigine, something like that. When I speak to that group in tongues, they will all hear me. It'll either be in their language, their own language, or they will at least understand. It will somehow be related to them what it is. Now, there is the gift of the interpretation of the speaking in tongues, right? So there is that too. And that's why I'm not totally saying that what you're experiencing isn't that. But you can't speak in tongues like that without an interpreter, and that's the instruction of the scripture.
Okay, so the way I've always been, as I was learned, I should say, let's say I was in an area and I saw a really bad accident, and let's say I didn't have the words right on the tip of my tongue. Okay, I could pray in my understanding, absolutely, but in an emergency situation or something, my thought would always be to do it in my head. Just to do it in my head and in my heart, for the situation at hand that might be presented there, or if there's a situation that I wasn't able to actually, handle in a spiritual manner or something of an emergency situation, I always kind of utilize that gift to do it in my own mind, in my own head, thinking that it's the tongue of angels, and I know it's edifying my spirit, and that God would lead me to show me if there was any other direction in any given situation. But that's kind of how I learned it. But like I said, I always want to learn more. I want to delve deeper. I love the meat of the word. I love the way you shared. It's really, really penetrated my heart. And I love to throw these questions at you because, like I said, it was, for 25 years, I was learning these things. And, the way they did it was that you speak in tongues and now you interpret. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's how I had learned it. Nobody else did the interpretation. And they did that on the point that they made, if it's not a tongue of men, it's a tongue of angels. And God will only give you the message. Okay. And you send that message to edify the body.
Yeah. And I wouldn't disagree with that. And the reason entirely, it depends on the circumstances. And I think you're legitimate. What I would add to that is this. In the book of Revelation, it says that there's a name given that only the Son of Man knows. Right? In other words, it's his name and nobody else knows what it is.
Okay.
The secret societies took that and they give out, for instance, I'll just give you an example. I use Masons, but I'm going to use the Mormon temple. When a Mormon goes into the temple and gets their temple recommended, goes in and gets their endowment, one of the things that happens there is they're given a new name. Okay, they're like, my name is Roy, but in the temple they might call me David. Okay, this is your new name, and it's David. So when you talk to God, you use that name. Is basically what, I don't think even Mormons understand this, but that's really what it's about. It's about talking to God, and that it's a name so that you know that when God calls that name, it's God talking to you. This is the idea. So I don't think on your personal level, however you make that connection with God, I wouldn't say that's not the case. I think it obviously is, and you've had experiences with it. I'm just talking about when you talk with a group of people, they will all understand in their own language. That's all.
Right. And in that given situation, if I couldn't speak their language, I wouldn't. I would. The only language I know is English.
Well, the thing is
So,
you would speak. Let's say I don't know how this works. I've never actually seen it happen that I know of. But let's say that you only do know English, and you're gonna make a witness. And let's say that you're gonna say, I know that it's important that you have love of God and love your fellow man as yourself, just like Derek Brose was just talking about a few minutes ago. I say it in English. Technically,
right.
the way I understand it, the Asian will hear it in, let's say it's Chinese, the German will hear it in German. You see how that it would go down the line? Like, you don't have to speak it differently, but the gift, when it goes out from you, they get it in their own language. That's how it actually works.
If you think about the way God separated the continents after the flood of Noah and how He changed their languages,
yeah.
And you think about the open border and what's happening, and people who come in who do speak a different language,
right?
And you can't understand, because I live in South Florida. I mean, you can't get a job down here if you're not bilingual, pretty much. But you know what? I kind of incorporate all these things into my mind, and I'm going, what is God trying to say in all of this? Now we've got these borders. There's people coming in that speak thousands of different languages, right?
Yeah,
right. And then God separated the continents for a reason, to separate His people, and He changed their native language because of idolatry, if I'm getting that correct.
Yeah, pretty much. Right.
Okay. So I was very curious about that, because in any given situation, when I'm frazzled, when I'm anxious, there's just no English words that come to my head, I'll just sit there and speak quietly in tongues in my head. And it seems to make a lot of sense to me in my mind, because, it flows so easily. It's not gibberish. I don't manifest it to other people, except when, we were in a fellowship and we did it the way that we were taught, to speak in tongues and interpret inside of a fellowship, and I had a lot of questions about that too. So did my husband, because it just seems that the interpretations were always the same, and people were trying, it said the interpretation can only come from the word, and it can only be edifying. And there were so many restrictions on how your interpretation had to be. And it had to be the same length as you're speaking in tongues. And I'm like, oh my gosh, but out of all of that stuff, it seemed to me, from the 9 manifestations from the gift of Holy Spirit, that one stuck with me in my own personal private life, even after I've been away from that for about 15, almost 18 years now. Well, I was just curious and just wanted to hear your side of that interpretation of the word according to God's word. If you could share with me, and you did a wonderful job, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Well, that's okay, Janet. And remember, the way you approach God is a personal thing, and if you feel like that you need to speak in this manner, whether it's in your mind or you're actually speaking the words, God's going to understand.
Especially when it comes to global things, and of course, I listen to Colonel McGregor. I listen to, but there's so many things going on, and it can so get jumbled up in your head, and it just seems that. You could pray forever and don't know exactly what to pray for, but God knows what you need to pray for. And that's why I utilize it in my own personal life.
And I think that's a legitimate way to handle it. So good for you. Okay.
Thank you. You just made my day.
All right. You take care. Okay.
Thanks too. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, y'all know what happens when I start approaching. I'm only at an hour and 5 minutes, but as we get closer to the hour and a half point, we start getting some interesting, buffetings, on here, and usually that's because they're trying to say you can't. I have some other YouTubers that I think I've seen it on Twitter where they say that YouTube seems to interfere with their live streams so that they can't do long ones. I've noticed that even with well-established groups like the Redacted. They're even having troubles like that lately. So, who knows? Colorado, let's see who this is. All right, you're calling from Colorado, correct? Hello.
Can you hear me?
I can.
It's Walter Velereski.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. What'd you say?
This is Walter.
Walter. Oh, Walter. Whoa. How's Walter doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
Oh, good. So I don't think you've ever called in, or if you've tried, we haven't gotten to you. So how are things?
I'm doing well.
Good.
I'd like some information.
Yes.
Who and what do we have from the first century besides Josephus and the Dead Sea Scrolls of some historical background of someone that was there?
Yeah, that's a good question, and the answer is no one.
That's right.
The you mentioned the Dead Sea Scrolls, and of course, as you know, Walter, the scholars want to push, not all of them. People like Eisenman have shown that by the internal evidence in some of the scrolls, not all of them, but in some of the scrolls, that it's obviously the time of the Roman occupation of Judea, right up through the destruction of the temple. So, but the scholars that do not want that will push everything back into the Maccabean period because it's contrary to the way traditional Christianity has been promoted. So to answer your question, even Josephus wasn't there at the time. Josephus was writing, the first time he wrote was in, right around the destruction of the temple, and then again in 90 AD. So he wrote the Antiquities of the Jews, and then he wrote the War of the Jews, along with Albion and some of the other things, his personal biography and all that. But he wasn't even an eyewitness. What he was seeing was the Messianic movement and the Ebionites, as I talked to earlier, the Essenes. He knew apparently James. He called him Banus, but the indication there is that is James, and he knew James. So that's as close to Jesus as we get as far as historical information. Now, there are some other things. Pliny, who was the governor of an area kind of where Turkey is today, he wrote, but this is like 100 AD. So that's still far down the line when he goes to Caesar and he says, "Hey, how do I handle these Christians?" And that he called them Christians, but there was this delineation, as you're aware, between the Pauline group, which was starting to come up about that time, and of course the real Christians who were Messianists. They were actually revolutionists, is what they were, revolutionaries. But historically, we've got the Acti Pilati, which means the Acts of Pilate, which has some information in it, but it's questionable as to who the real author is. But we can still look at it for some information. You've got Tacitus. You've got, again, all these guys. This isn't 20 to 30 AD that we're talking about. We're talking about 50 AD on down. Even Paul doesn't show up with his letters, and he didn't know Jesus either until 50 AD, right? Approximately 40 to 50 AD. So frankly, there really isn't anything right then and there historically. There's one other aspect of this, and I've talked about this before. Josephus mentions that they have, and this is backed up with information from the Roman records, that there was this Taheb, this Samaritan prophet, that did all these things that we seem to hear about Jesus, and that Pilate did crucify him, and because Pilate crucified him, he got in trouble with Tiberius Caesar. We do know that is an historical fact. So that's another reason why I really shift from this whole idea of a Jewish Messiah into the blessing of the Ephraimite birthright son coming through Shiloh. So that is, in my estimation, the most important piece of information about this whole mystery in both the New Testament and historically. And that's why I wrote the Crimson Thread, because of that piece of information. So other than that, there really isn't much.
In the Maccabean period,
yes,
do you have any books next to you of that era there that's reliable that I can like buy and read?
Not that I could reach real easy, and none that I can really recall. The best thing to do, in my estimation, on that, because it's a very good record, you can get the books of the Maccabees. You know, they're included in the Roman Catholic Bible. So you can go to a bookstore or whatever, and you can get the Roman Catholic Bible, and in it they'll have the Maccabees, and you can read that, and it's pretty good. I mean, I think historically, because we're talking about the Greek Seleucids, we're talking about the problem with Antiochus Epiphanes coming in and destroying the temple and stealing stuff and all that, and I think you'll get a feel for the Maccabean period. But you'll notice when you read that we're not talking about the accusations that Jesus and that James and the Dead Sea Scrolls make against the Herodians, which is, you know, about a century later.
All right. That's about all I had.
All righty. Well, thanks. And plus, you know, you can Google it. I've never done that, but you could Google the Maccabees and the Maccabean period in particular, and you might find some references there. I've never done that, but it might prove efficacious. So why don't you give it a shot?
No, there's a bunch of books on Amazon, but I just didn't know if you recommended any particular, you know, publisher or anything like that.
Yeah, you know, Eisenman is pretty hard to beat. He covers the Maccabean period, of course, because he has to, because of the arguments that the Dead Sea Scrolls are only from the Maccabean period. So he does a real good job of that, both in your James, the Brother of Jesus, but he also does it in the New Testament Code. Did you get that?
Yeah, I have it, but I haven't even opened it.
Okay, well, you'll find, just go ahead. Now, there's no index in the book of the New Testament Code. How do I know that? Because I helped work on it. So it's online. So what you'll have to do is to look at the index for the New Testament Code. Go online. I can't really tell you where to go, but it should tell you in the book. You could probably access it somehow from the information that's in there. And go to the index and look up the Maccabees and the Maccabean period, and you'll get you'll get the actual page numbers, chapter, you know, all that stuff in the New Testament Code.
I probably already have my answer. Yeah, I knew you would help.
All righty, Walter. It's good to hear from you.
All right. Have a good night.
You
Bye.
too, Walter. Take care. All right. All right. Okay. Just as I get ready to end the show, we get another call. All right. I think we're up and running. Hello.
Howdy, how you doing?
All right. Where are you calling from?
Illinois. Or should I say Illinois?
Illinois. Yeah. Boy, now isn't that the truth? Although you've got plenty of company. You got Washington State, Oregon, California, New York, New Jersey. I mean, Vermont, I think,
right
even
on.
now. Yeah, so there are plenty of places that are trying to do the same thing.
My name's Mike, by the way. I often refer to myself as the redheaded stepchild of YouTube.
Oh, really? Okay.
My channel's the Watchman News. I'm well hated.
All right. Well, that means you're probably saying something right.
Well, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
If you're not making enemies, yeah, you're not really doing much.
That's right. And I can speak to that.
So I wanted to ask you a question, and I've been wanting to ask you this question for a long time. With everything going on in the world, with how we are watching so many nations work together lockstep, whether it be with, the arm thing or no matter what it be, what do you think the chances are that what we're seeing on the surface with, say, the conflict between Ukraine and Russia and all that, what do you think the chances of all of it being a ruse? All of these people, meaning China, Russia, United States, all these countries working together to bring us down to our knees, the people of the world, to accept all of this stuff they're wanting to introduce. Do you think there's much chance of that being a reality?
Yes, I do. I have said for some time that the leaders of the world seem to be in lockstep with a central ideology and a central command. Who it is, is it the Rothschilds? Is it somebody we've never heard of? Is it the Antichrist? And I don't, there are different concepts of what the Antichrist is. I wouldn't want to get into that subject tonight because really the only place that's ever discussed is in 1st and 2nd John, or maybe it's 1st and 3rd John. But anyway, it's really not. It doesn't say that word anywhere else. So I've got to say, however, that the concept, at least in the Hebrew scriptures and in Revelation as well, that there would be this unified action against those who are seeking the truth. And I see that, and I do believe that there's some central, very powerful individual, be it just some superbly rich, decadently rich individual or group of individuals, or whether it really is an evil entity from one of the other, from another dimension that's making its power felt here. I do see it. I think we saw it during the entire situation with the OWS. If you're reading between the lines, I mean the way because Dr. Michael Heiser, he tries to stay away when he was teaching. He would try to stay away from the eschatological things. He wanted to talk more about how to live your life and how to be Christ-like and those kinds of things. He didn't want to get too much into the eschatological stuff because it's so hard to nail down. Another person that has said some interesting things, and I've mentioned this before, is Pastor Chuck Baldwin, and he places, of course, the Book of Revelation almost entirely in the 1st century, and that's preterism, and I agree, but there are certain things that are mentioned that don't fit the 1st century up through the destruction of the temple. And one of them is the rich men of the world who will deceive the world through the use of their sorceries. And that word sorceries is pharmakia. Well, what did we just see? The whole world went along with this. Nobody put up a question. I mean, nobody of any power or influence. I mean, we've had individual doctors and researchers and people who I better not name here, because that probably get me flagged. But they've come out and they've shown. I mean, look at the sudden demise. I'm using different words here. The sudden demise of thousands of people, athletes, etc. And nobody sees. Well, okay, we had. It's not global warming. It's something else that's happened. What's happened differently in the last 3 years that hadn't happened before? And they don't want to talk about that. Why is it that they all agree to it? Why is it that the European Union almost?
Roy, I asked the same thing about autism. Why can't we discuss that? Why is it that we're all being pushed to celebrate autism, but nobody's being pushed to discuss why it's happening?
Exactly. And Trump was convinced that his son, come on, help me, what's his son's name? I forget. Barron. He was very much against this whole program of childhood inoculations. I think I can say that word, because of what happened to Barron. And then all of a sudden, he totally changed his tune, pushes a thing, even with the military, and tries to pretend like he wasn't, but that it's a miracle, and he's saved hundreds of millions of lives. What's going on here? So, in other words, what I'm saying is, it is all to attack us. We are no matter what happens in the world. I'm not saying that Russia, doesn't have a beef here. And maybe they are, as I pointed out, trying to pull away from the wickedness of the West. I don't doubt that. But at the same time, who's really manipulating all this, and who are they listening to? I think there is a central power, be it supernatural, which some people will laugh like hell for me even mentioning it might be a possibility, or it's one of these super rich people that we've never even heard of, not even the King of England, not even the Rothschilds, somebody else entirely. It could be. So, but the fact that they are in lockstep, normally nations are at each other's throats. No, we're not going to do that because that's not in our interest, right? Well, that's all changed. Yeah, there's a difference between Russia and China, and we're seeing some things in the global South, but I think that goes along more with the idea that in the last days there would be people, whatever the last days are. I mean, that's another eschatological thing that's kind of hard to define, but at some point the people will start to see evil and pull away from it, come out of Babylon. So I think we've seen this effort by some single power, be it supernatural or otherwise. It's influenced a lot of people, but now there are those that are starting to say, no, we really don't want to go along with this program and we're pulling out. And we just need to watch that and see what happens. The caution that we have to give, and this is my own personal opinion, that doesn't mean that Russia and China are the saviors of the world. Some people are saying, Edgar Casey said that Russia would save the world. I wouldn't go that far. What I do say is that Russia is going to punish this place. That's happening right now, financially.
And I tell people too that we need to get out of the mindset that we have to pick one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You
exactly.
know, just because you say you don't support one doesn't mean you support the other.
Exactly. And that goes along with what Derek Brose and I were talking about earlier. How do we know who's good and who's evil? The important thing for us to do is love God and love our fellow man as ourselves, and in that process, search for the truth, because the idea that we'll know evil and good. I mean, it's like I was saying, people call me evil because of my family structure back in the 80s and 90s. You're evil. Well, now all of a sudden, those same people are embracing, how do I say this? Other alternative styles, even
right?
even surgical manipulation to change what people have been born to be. Those same people that point fingers at me, and I mean, there's a whole gamut that goes across a whole spectrum here, but this is just an example. Well, Christians, for instance, they'll point at me and say, you're, well, by the way, the Pope just said that maybe celibacy for priests isn't necessary. Did you read that? So, well, why?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, he said that maybe we're going to, maybe this ban on priests marrying, we're going to do away with that. Boy, I'm sure that's setting the traditional Catholics out of control.
Well, that was one of the things that I was atheist for the majority of my life. And I'm not going to go into it now because it take a while, but I've got a pretty incredible story behind it. And anyway, one of the things when I was atheist that I would call Christians out on all the time is this whole one man, one woman concept. Mm-hmm. I keep asking them, where in the hell is that in the Bible?
Well, they get it, of course. They get it, of course, from the extant Genesis 2 and 3, chapters 2 and 3. That's where they get it. But and I've explained that, and of course, it's been rejected by many people. Let me say this, okay? No, there's no prohibition against that. There's a prohibition against men being with men, and there's but there's no prohibition against a man having multiple women. As a matter of fact, quite the contrary. God told David that if he had wanted more, he would have given them to him. I mean, why would God help him to commit a sin if that's, if it was a sin? So no, that didn't happen. The fact is that God doesn't look down upon it, and Jesus didn't change any of that. And another reason why I have a big problem with Paul. But I don't want to get into all that. All I'll say is this, that my understanding of it at this point in time, and I'm just talking about the marriage situation, if you make a vow, you have to stick to the vow. Unless, and I'm not talking about going to the state and getting their permission, okay? I find that to be an abomination. The state has no business being in the man and woman relationship.
I would agree 100%.
Right. But if a man and woman make a vow, let's say, like I was 18, I didn't have to get married to my wife, but I did because we thought it was the right thing to do. the most we had done is kissed each other before we got married. You know, but even in that situation, when I look back on it, I realized I didn't take a vow that she would be the only one I'd be with, which was kind of interesting at the time. And I won't give the background information. I didn't plan it that way. It's just the way it happened. But before we entered into plural marriage, just to be on the safe side, I said, you know, we had studied these different things to get together and had come to an agreement. And she said, well, I'm willing to do this. So in other words, I went to the other party to the contract, right? And I said, should we alter this contract and do this? And she agreed. She said yes. And that's lawful. If you have a contract and you go to the parties of the contract and you alter the contract and they all agree, that's fine. And God says it's fine too. Right?
Right.
So I don't want to get into a whole big discussion about, you know, that particular thing because it really causes people to go nuts. But yeah, we really have thousands of years of indoctrination, as Derek Brose mentioned earlier, what we think is good and what we think is evil, and we're not right. And even Isaiah said they will call evil good and good evil. We don't know. So the best thing to do is that you can't hold somebody else to your, there are reasonable limits, I think. I mean, obviously I'm not going to go along with, I'm talking very circumspectly here. I'm not going to go along with having some 6-year-old decide that they're not what they are and that they're going to change themselves. You read between the lines. I'm sorry, but that's evil. Period. Bottom line, there's no ifs, ands, or buts.
Yes, like I tell everybody, we just need to knock off the nonsense and just say no.
Yeah. So, but on the other side, you have Christians calling me a heretic because I do what the patriarchs did. You know,
right?
I mean, what right do they have to call me a heretic because they don't understand? And I've often said this: when you call somebody a heretic, and often when you call somebody a blasphemer, you're just calling them a pejorative because they disagree with your position or your opinion. So Derek Brose is right. My son Jeremy is right when he's saying, you know, there are certain things that you can say are good or evil, but when you're basing it upon 6,000 years, 2,000 years, 50 years, 10 years of indoctrination into something, and you're going to call everybody else a heretic or a blasphemer or whatever, you're treading on very thin water, and frankly, you are the Satan when you do that. You are the accuser of the brethren when you do that.
Exactly. They are actually truly committing what the Bible described as murder.
Yeah, you know, I'd like to talk about a lot of the early quote unquote saints that were martyred and the real history behind those martyrdoms and why they happened, but it would take too much time to do. But by and large, in every circumstance, other than the Roman ones considered certain things sedition. So that's kind of an exception, despite what the Christians will tell you about the early persecution of the Christians or so-called Christians. But subsequent to that, it almost always was over some dogmatic, doctrinal issue that you would be burned at the stake, called a heretic, a blasphemer, and burned at the stake, or hung, or drowned in water, or beheaded, or quartered, or whatever. Really, what kind of a right did they have to do that merely on the opinion that they have, right?
Exactly.
All right, well, I'm going to hang up. I can see they're going to take down my, I just had a glitch here. I can see it coming. So I better sign off. Thanks for calling.
Right on, well,
hey, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Roy.
I appreciate it. Bye-bye. Okay, yeah,
Bye-bye.
we better knock off here tonight. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Let me turn this off so that we don't have another problem.
Power on.
And we're going to do that. Okay. All right, everybody. Well, let's see. I got a problem here already. Yeah, we're going to lose the signal, so it's a good thing that I stopped when I did. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I hope that was enlightening. I'm kind of amazed we didn't get into any of the subject matter from the other day about the resurrection, but that's okay. Maybe it was clear to everybody but AZ Infidel and Maurice Wilson. which I, of course, explained in the description box of that video about the new heaven and the new earth, if you wonder what I'm talking about, if you didn't figure that out. My little explanation to AZ Infidel and Maurice Wilson, who were thinking that I had denied Christ, which was kind of an interesting accusation. And I rest my case on people calling you a heretic or a blasphemer or whatever when you have a position different than their own. We didn't have any discussions on that, and that's great. Hopefully everybody, I did a good enough job where you understood where I was coming from. The world's going crazy. It's not going to get any better. Banks failing. The FBI, Justice Department, with Biden's executive orders. If you disagree with the government, especially on the Ukraine thing or any number of other things, they're giving your name to be watched. Biden's already said that. So there's no more free speech. It's all a lie. The whole thing about the Bill of Rights has now been turned upside down, if it ever was true. It's all a lie. That's satanic. The lie. You don't even have to say they lie about everything. They lie. End of story. The lie. The lie is they're telling you the truth when they're not. As such, we're in a lot of trouble. You got to start getting together with people of like minds, and you still have to be careful with that because the government has all these little spies out there, all these people that want to be 007. They may get paid, they may not, but they get some sort of a benefit. They think they're a spy for the government. The FBI's group is called InfraGard. I know people personally who have been set up by these assholes. A lot of those in January 6th, same kind of thing. The government doesn't investigate crime anymore. They investigate people, especially people that have a difference of opinion with them. Evil personified in the world today. Keep your eyes on the horizon, your ears to the ground, situational awareness on high. Prep, pray, stay out of the way. Nothing wrong with defending yourself, but don't go looking for trouble. Try to find like-minded people and get ready for what's coming. Could very well be that you go to your bank tomorrow and you're not going to have any money that you can get out. It could happen. It's happened to a lot of people now. We started warning about this years ago. We saw the bail-ins happen with Wells Fargo and Bank of America about a month ago, where they were taking people's money out of the accounts. And now we have entire banks failing, and primarily the big banks are not free of this, but they'll be the recipients of all these smaller banks being dismantled. They're coming after us, taking away your second. Look what Washington State's doing. Washington State's trying to ban what they call assault weapons, but it's just semi-automatics. They just call them that because they're trying to scare people. It passed their House. I think it's gone to the Senate now. And the government, if the Senate passes it, the Governor Inslee will sign it. He's a traitor and a demonic prick. Just say it the way it is. All right. So they're trying to take away your ability to protect yourselves. Take away your money. Take away your property. Take away the ability to protect yourselves. Take your sons and your daughters for useless wars. And now, who else? What else are they going to come for? Y'all take care. We'll talk to you next time out here.